If you can do that, if you can take out all the inputs that can run a script, then you can block cross-site scripting. We also have another type of attack called SQL injection. So you have a SQL database in the backend, and then that normally helps with querying information. But now, inside the username password box, someone puts a SQL query. What if someone puts a SQL query that says, give me all the username passwords? If you don't have input validation, someone can put a SQL query. It's going to query the database and give you all the username passwords. I used to teach at University of California, Irvine, and I always demoed that for my clients. We had a lab that we could demo this, and it's possible. There's also a lot of YouTube videos that can show you how to do that.
Yeah.
Broken access control, session hijacking, path traversal. What we want to say that is that there's an organization out there called OWASP. OWASP has a list of attacks that normally happen against web applications, and it calls them the top 10, OWASP top 10. And then as you can see, I can see that the first attack is injection. So injection is the most common attack that happens against web applications. Then we have broken authentication, that we have sensitive data exposure. So OWASP normally evaluates this list every 2 to 3 years, and they update it and say, hey, this is the most common thing that's happening around this. So you can go into OWASP Top 10 website and then look it up and see what's wrong, or what type of attacks are most common against web applications. Phishing attacks. I believe everyone knows what phishing attack is, right? You know what phishing attack is, Sunil?
Yeah, basically, sometimes we get some kind of email, right, which says that, yeah, you won a lottery or something, which will take us to a bad actor, and they will.
Yep, as we see over here, sometimes you get contacted by email, sometimes by phone, sometimes by text message. They ask you to click on a link, they ask you to call, so you can be directed to someone or to a system, to eventually to the wrong system. They want you to put on your username, password, give them confidential information, pay them, and things like that. And that's a phishing attack. How can you prevent phishing from happening? The first thing is cybersecurity training. So remember, if you're talking about any type of compliance systems actually perform cybersecurity training. That's important. You have to teach people that, hey, this is something that might happen, and this is how you can protect yourself. Automated link checking and AI-based antiviruses. So if there's a link in your email and there's a software that can automatically check it, that's awesome. That's what we want. So it's going to mark it and say, hey, this is a bad link. Don't click on it. You want to have good passwords. Do you know what a good password looks like, Sunil? What a standard good password looks like?
Which should have alphanumeric, capital, lowercase, and numbers and some special characters, right? Which shouldn't be having a repeated characters or letters, and yeah.
What about the password length?
Sorry?
What about the password length? How many characters?
Yeah, minimum mostly recommended 8, but nowadays, yeah, it's even increasing beyond 8 characters.
Good job. Good job. So normally it was recommended as 8. Nowadays, it's better to keep it around 10 at least. So you're right. Good job. Use multi-factor authentication. Use two-factor authentication. So just not rely on a password. Have a other authentication mechanism like your biometrics and things like that. Have DNS and web filtering so they can check if the link that is provided in your emails or the request that's going out is going to be like legitimate request, or it's not going to a bad website. And then if something does happen, you must have an incident response plan that explains what should we do if we are a victim of a phishing attack. We also have a concept called honeypots. Now, the concept of honeypots comes from the idea of studying your bad actors. So if someone wants to attack your network, what are they looking for? And what methods do they use? and how are they approaching it. So you're actually going to create a fake something like a fake link, fake website that points them to specific fake documents. And you just want to see who tries to access them. How do they do that? When do they do that? And eventually, after they spend a lot of time, they get to some documents that are useless. But this shows you who your bad actors are and then what they're planning to do. So honeypots are something that are useful, and it's good for studying. It's good for studying your bad actors to see what they're thinking about and how capable they are. We also have a concept called the MITRE attack framework. Now, the concept of the MITRE attack framework comes from the idea that it happens a lot that when it's detected in an organization that someone has compromised them, they will figure that out after probably months and months and months of the bad actor already being in their network and having access to their stuff. So if the bad actor had access to my network for a few months, they probably had access to a lot of things. They probably had a lot of time to do whatever they wanted. The MITRE attack framework explains that, look, if you find signs in your environment, if you find signs in your network that something's not right, then what you can do is to study it. So by finding that sign, you can figure out at what stage they are in. So for example, if I see that someone's constantly scanning my network, my firewall is reporting that someone's scanning you, I would know they're not in my network yet, but they're trying to get in. If I see that there are indication that someone is trying to access a specific file in my network that's encrypted, and they're repeatedly trying to do that, that's an indicator that there's in my network. And they're so advanced in my network that they're close to this file and try to break in, trying to open that encrypted folder and file. So the MITRE attack framework says that look at the signs, and then they're going to tell you at what stage the attacker is, and then you can take the right action afterwards. So MITRE attack requires some training. You have to watch a lot of videos, see how it looks like, what indications of attack are there. And then based on that, you would be able to take your next steps to see what you can do next. So with that being said, this was the end of our training today. Sunil, I hope you enjoyed it. Was that something that you were looking for? Did you learn a lot?
Yeah, definitely. This domain is specifically, I haven't worked much onto that. Thank you for giving me a lot of insight onto this. I do have some questions, right? In the real
Sure.
interview, suppose say I'm applying for IAM domain, right? Identity and access management domain. Will there be questions related to network and yeah, any other domains?
So if you're trying to apply for an IAM position, IAM, when it comes to identity and access management, this means that you are the person responsible for creating users, creating groups, handling permissions. If you want to make that happen, you have to have a very good and deep understanding on how IAM authentication works in different environments. Understand Active Directory, how it works in Windows. Understand LDAP on Linux. So set up an LDAP server on Linux and then define users in it and then see how you can communicate with it. You have to understand OUs, organizational units. You have to understand DNs, distinguished names. You have to understand RDNs, relative distinguished names. These are things that are considered questions, all different domains of IAM. You have to understand how you can refer to a specific entity. Now, let's say you're applying for this job in AWS. Then you have to understand how AWS IAM works, because AWS has a service that is called IAM.
Yeah.
So study it, try to work with it. You have to understand how to create users, groups, and roles, because roles are very, very important. How do you, for example, in a cloud environment, allow one service in the cloud to communicate with another service in the cloud? You have to do that by using IAM roles. How do you configure that? How do you configure OAuth? open authentication. How do you configure SAML? How do you configure federation? So for example, if you want to configure SAML, the concept of SAML is that you have an authentication provider, let's say Active Directory, already on your on-prem network, and you want the same people in your on-prem network to communicate with the cloud services in AWS. But if you have 200 users inside your on-prem network, you don't want to go to AWS and create another 200 users. This means you have to go and set up federation. On your local Active Directory network, you set up federation, you go to IAM and configure it so these two can connect together. So all the users, when they authenticate with Active Directory, they have access to AWS as well. What about OAuth? You have a web application. And your web application, you want to say, all right, for example, Facebook application, you have permission to use my pictures and do this. That's OAuth. The person in charge of the resources is giving permission to another application, in this case, like Facebook, to deal with the resources that in cases are your pictures. So understand the concepts of OAuth, SAML, LDAP, IAM, and know how to deal with them. Because when you go to an interview, they ask you one question, they want to see how much you know around it. It's not a good idea to say, if they ask you, okay, have you ever worked with authentication systems? And you say, yes. Nope. They were looking for this. Have you ever worked with authentication systems? Yes, I've worked with Active Directory. I work with AWS IAM. I can set up an LDAP server on Linux. And if you want to specify, create a user in Windows, this is how you do it. If you want to create an, user in AWS, you create an IAM user. You give it permissions by using this. And then if you want to allow two services to communicate, then you're going to be creating a role, allowing this service to access that service, all these different things. If I want to allow my on-premise environment to communicate with cloud or do single sign-on, I'm going to configure federation on my Windows server on premises and then connect it to AWS and things like that, right? So IAM has its own specific domain, but these are the concepts that you have to look for. Take a look, federation, SAML, OAuth, LDAP, Active Directory. Look all of those on YouTube. Start to look at different videos, how it's configured. Take notes. Federation, how does it happen? How does it happen on Azure? So the more you know, the better. But I remember once I applied for a job in IAM, and they were using this specific application in a bank. It was for a bank. And then I said, I have experience with all these different frameworks. Eventually, I decided not to work with them. But if you know a lot about other IAM systems, and if there's a new system you're not aware of, they're going to say, okay, this person already knows his thing. So they can definitely figure out, or we're going to give them a training and they will know how to use our system. So that's how it's supposed to work.
And how relevant, whenever there is a question, right, do we need to answer them in star format, or the domain specific questions are mainly test on knowledge, right, more than experience, what we have worked in the past and all. So how we need to answer such kind of questions?
Well, my recipe of success was to always have a background experience about the topic that I want to talk about. So if I know I applied for an IAM job and I'm going to go to an interview, it's good to have background knowledge, but it's better to have hands-on experience. If you want to get hands-on experience, it's not that difficult. So you can have access to a lot of things for free and a lot of videos for free and a lot of step-by-steps for free, but it gives you it. You remember when you're interviewing, they have to see, they have to feel that you're good for the job. Now, one person goes there and says, this is the concept. Another person goes there and says, I've already done it. Which one's going to get the job? The one that says, hey, I've already done it several times. I have the experience, right? So you want to be successful in an interview. You have to be confident. You have to have a little bit of good background, both on the knowledge level and both on the experience level. Now, it also depends on your position. If you're applying for a job that's a tier 1 job, they're going to say, okay, you know the concepts, you're good. But if you're applying for a tier 3 job that gets paid 3 times more, then they're going to want some experience. So it depends on the job level you're applying as well. Make sense?
Yeah.
All right. Any questions? Just feel free to reach out if you have any questions, and then we're all here to help you out. And hopefully this session has been informative for you.
Yeah.
I also see Alina K and K. Not sure if they're there or not, but if you guys have any questions, please let me know. And then IK operations, if anyone's there, we're going to be closing our session. Is there anything else that we want to go through? So hopefully you enjoyed it, and have a good rest of your day.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you.
Want to become a software engineer at Google? You can, like thousands of our students. You just need to learn from those who've already cleared FANG interviews. At Interview Kickstart, our interview prep courses are developed and taught live by 150 plus instructors from Tier 1 companies like Google and Facebook. Our courses are tailored to help you crack software engineering domain interviews, including back-end, full stack, machine learning, embedded systems, data science, and more. To learn more, book your free webinar slot today